Hello, my name is Brady Duncan, and I'm going to be talking about my NU Mutual Aid Community Fridge Observation Project. So, what I did for this project, the process, is that I would go to the community fridge on St. Stephen Street and I would sit at the church across the street. I did this so I wouldn't be getting in anyone's way and bothering anyone or interfering with anything. I would stay for about an hour and a half each time. I figured this was the perfect amount of time because I would get in enough time to actually observe things, but once you stay longer, or I went usually later in the day, so once it got later, it was a lot less likely for people to come. I would go once a week, usually on Tuesdays. That's when the community fridge would get stocked, so this was the best day. And I would take pictures when people approached and observe their actions, anything I noticed about them in specific, or what they took. Here's some photos I took. One is from November 2nd, another is from November 16th, and this one on the right of someone actually taking food from the fridge is also from November 2nd. Here's some expectations I had coming in. I was expecting that far too many people would be taking too much from the fridge or taking an excessive amount. This is what I was told about, and somebody mentioned that people would sometimes come in cars or trucks and take massive amounts of food from the fridge and just drive away. It would be mostly displaced people or people without homes or permanent living situations, which obviously is difficult to tell sometimes, but sometimes you can notice things like them carrying around a lot of their belongings or something like that that would possibly hint to the fact that they're displaced. I was expecting it also to be older people because that are the common expectations of people who are experience food insecurity, even though that is not the case. This was before I was educated, I would say, in the concepts of food insecurity and the facts of it. So I expected it to be older or displaced people when I didn't realize that food insecurity can affect anyone and commonly affects college students at a higher rate. And I thought it was going to be a consistent amount of people coming every Tuesday or every day or something like that. And that actually didn't happen to be the case. The times and the amount of people were completely random. Here's some impressions I noticed. The first two visits were really slow. I believe throughout those first 3 hours I was there, nobody came. Actually, one person came and they actually didn't take anything. But then the next time I came was incredibly busy. Um, it was people were coming every 5 minutes. There was a line at one point for people to wait to take things from the fridge, and that was a day that it was happened to be incredibly full. The weather was heavily um, the weather had a huge effect on whether people would come. There was one day I went where it was incredibly cold out and it was not pleasant at all. And there was another day where it was pouring rain out. And both of those days were the two slowest days where almost nobody came. And it was heavily based on the fridge's contents, how often people were coming or which people were coming, because the days that it was empty, there was almost no one there. And people would, anyone who would visit would take things, but the days that it were incredibly full were the busiest days, like I mentioned before. Here's a photo I took on November 9th of two people at the fridge looking through it, and you can see they have bags to fill up with the food. Here's some surprises and observations. I was surprised by the age ranges of people. As I mentioned before, my expectations were older people, but it actually happened to be more college students, which actually makes sense considering the fact that Northeastern's community fridge is on a college and it's designed for college students as well as community members. So a lot of the people coming were younger people that I was genuinely surprised by. People would take different amounts of food and there would be different amounts of. I know I talked about this before, but it was completely full on different days. There would be some days where it was empty, some days where it's full, and that did affect the amount of people that came. Here's an example of that right here. On November 16th, the fridge was stacked, and that happened to be the most busy day. And November 2nd, it was another case. It just happened to be one of those days where there was no food, there wasn't a shipment coming in. So that was one of the days where only one person came, and that person ended up not taking anything. Here's some tips I have for anyone who is interested in taking on a project like this, whether it's for a class or for any other reason, just want to get involved in the community. I'd recommend to bring a notebook to write on. There's only so many observations you can remember, depending on how often you go or how much you go or how much happens when you're there. It's going to be difficult to remember everything without writing it down. And go into detail on your notes, whether it's something you just want to remember and make observations and learn about the community and who's affected by food insecurity to need this food, or you're doing it for a class and you're writing an essay or having a discussion about it. It's always a good idea to go into detail on your notes so you can read it later, look at it, and remember exactly what happened, or make new conclusions or form new opinions. Also, try to interview different types of visitors. I know not everyone is comfortable with something like that. I personally did not get the chance to interview anyone, but I've heard people in the past have had great experience with some of the people who come to the community fridge, and it can give you a brand new perspective on everyone has a different story. The reason they're coming there may be a permanent thing, maybe a temporary thing, maybe more serious than others, and it's great to learn everyone's story and see everyone's perspective.